Hey, what's up, everybody? So this is Coach Rahien, and today what I'm going to talk to you about is 10 ways to become an effective teacher. Now, the teaching profession is a profession that I've worked in for many years. I've had a lot of success as a teacher, and I've had a lot of success as a leader working with other teachers. So what I want to do is share what I've learned to help other teachers who are coming into the profession. So here are the 10 ways to become an effective teacher. The first way, number one, is to have knowledge of self. Knowledge of self is a critical point of being an educator because before you can help anybody else, you have to understand and know how to help yourself. Educators are confronted with many challenges. You deal with people day in, day out. Students come in, they bring all different kinds of things to your classroom and things that you can't see on the surface. They're like treasures almost. When your students come in, they're sitting there, you don't know their background. You don't know where they're coming from. But the one thing that you do know is you know yourself. And sometimes we don't spend enough time really unpacking ourselves to understand who we are. By that, I mean our own belief systems. So when you go into education as an educator, the first thing you want to know is myself. What do I believe? Do I believe that all students can learn? Some people don't believe that. And that is the essential problem that many struggling teachers have when they come into the profession. When they look at their students, they pass judgment. It's human to pass judgment, so don't feel bad about yourself if you've done it. Just know that you have to understand in order to be an effective teacher, you have to change your belief system. In other words, you have to learn to love your students no matter where they come from, no matter what their situations are, and believe that you can help them. Know that you're not going to always have the answer. As a matter of fact, to be an effective teacher, you don't always have to have the answers. What you do have to have is an undying desire to help other people. Teachers who are effective understand that their students will figure out what they need to know in order to be successful in their class. And if you are an effective teacher, you put most of your energy in to helping your students learn more about themselves so that no matter what happens in the classroom, they can learn, they can show, they can bring out what they already have inside. So as an educator, as a teacher, your job is to help release the students, help them to make their own discoveries about education, help them to make their own connections. That's where knowledge of self becomes critical, because then you're consciously moving yourself out of the way so that the learning can take place. When you're focused on yourself, you become an educator who is focused on the teaching and not the learning. And effective teachers focus on the learning, not the teaching. Here's number two for an effective teacher. Effective teachers focus on student learning. By that, I mean that effective teachers focus on creating the experiences that allow for learning. Creating the experiences. In other words, if you are a teacher and your idea of school is to stand and pontificate to your students, to talk them to death, you're going to lose them. People don't listen well, except for, on YouTube or different venues like this, because it's designed. It's almost as if we know that we're going to be listening to someone, so we prime our brains to get into a listening mode. But when you're face to face with somebody, people expect more. We know this. You know it. When you're sitting and you're having a conversation with someone, if they're droning on and on and on, you get tired very quick, especially nowadays when attention spans are short. So effective teachers create experiences, and Throughout the experience, an effective teacher will do the most critical part of creating the experience, which is to ask questions. Your job as an educator is to find out what your students know, to be very curious, to ask them. You know that your students are learning when they tell you that they are learning, not when you make assumptions about their learning. Some teachers fall into that pothole when they're working with their kids. They'll see the students and they make judgments about what they see without checking with the student to see what the student actually knows. And the only way to do that is to ask questions, be curious. That's number 2. Number 3, effective teachers create considerate relationships. What do I mean by considerate relationships? That means that you take into consideration the fact that you have natural blind spots. You don't know your students. Truth is, you don't really know yourself. If you are 30 years old and you live to be 70, there's 40 years of knowledge that you will not know except for as you experience those years. So the same way that you are constantly and consistently learning more about yourself, you need to be constantly and consistently learning about your students and understanding that you have to take into consideration that the things that you don't know about your students. You have to remember you're dealing with human beings, and humans don't always have the answers off top. An effective teacher recognizes that and makes adjustments for those considerations, the things that they don't know. You don't know if that student is has been in an abusive situation. You don't know if that student is going through growing pains. You don't know if that student is not interested. You don't know what that student's situation is. All you can do is ask and make adjustments. So effective teachers are considerate and they build relationships. They care enough about their students to care and understand that you don't know everything about your kids, so you don't make assumptions. Number 4, effective teachers get results. Effective teachers know how to identify what the goal is, and they know how to ensure that they are getting the desired result. In other words, before the lesson begins of instructing your students, you tell them what you expect them to learn or what they're going to learn. You don't want them to go into the lesson blind, not knowing what the objective is or not really understanding what the objective is. And you do this because as an effective teacher, you know that there's a million ways to translate what's taking place in the classroom. You want to make sure that you are consistently identifying what you want students to learn. Otherwise, the learning will be all over the place. Students will learn things that have absolutely nothing to do with the lesson that you're trying to teach, and it'll show up on your exams. So get results by identifying the goals. Effective teachers make connections. As an effective teacher, your responsibility is to own the fact that learning takes place only when you connect new things to old things. If you're trying to teach students or you're going into the educational field and you're trying to really understand how can you get your students to really grasp the information, first understand that anything that you tell your students more than likely is going to be new. So you have to create the kind of experiences and ask the kind of questions that will create the result. Okay. A simple question might be for an experience that you create in your classroom may be to just ask your students, so tell me what you learned. What did you pull from this experience? And listen very intently to what they tell you. Don't make up things in your mind about what students are saying. Listen to what they tell you. Okay. So that's number 5, Number 6, effective teachers focus on the objective and the goals of the lesson. It's important to know that because you're dealing with people, there is a chance for things to go on a tangent. And sometimes tangents will help you. But you want to make sure that throughout the lesson, you're consistently focusing on the objective of the lesson. Don't allow that to get lost, because once it gets lost, your students are going to learn something else. Now, the something else may be valuable, but it may not be valuable in line in regards to what you want your students to learn. Okay, so don't get swept into that. I've seen teachers fall in love with certain lessons that they love to teach, and the lessons have nothing to do with the objective. So the students learn about something, but it's not what you wanted them to learn. Here's number 7. Effective teachers differentiate the instruction. By differentiating the instruction, let me be clear. I mean that you understand that you're teaching different people. Students, if you have 30 students in your class, you have 30 different ways of teaching. In education, we have a tendency to group students according to auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learners. And many great teachers will go beyond that and understand that everybody is a blend of all three. Some are more heavy in certain areas, like some may be more tactile than others, but we all learn in a variety of ways. So as an effective teacher, you want to make sure that if you are going to focus on teaching all of your students, you have to create the kind of experiences that allow all students to learn. Don't squeeze students into a box. Just try to remember the last time that someone tried to squeeze you into a box or force you to learn in a way that is not comfortable for you. How difficult was it for you? Okay. Here's number 8. Effective teachers create clear routines and are very consistent with those routines. In your classroom, when you're working with your students, if you don't create clear routines, when I say clear, I mean that students know the routines of the class and you're so consistent with it that students fall or follow your routines naturally. You want that routine to become your classroom culture. This is how things are done in your classroom. And if you have not established clear routines, your student's going to do any and everything. And if you're not consistent, then you're communicating to your students that what you say is a routine is really not that important. Students are always learning from the things that they see and the things that they hear and the things that they observe from their teachers. So if you have to be very clear about what those routines are from the minute they walk into your classroom through the transitions in your classroom all the way to the end, and be very clear about what those students will learn. I'll give you a great idea as a good starter. In your classroom, when your students come in from the hallways, if your school is like normal, like most schools where the hallways are noisy and students are talking and socializing, when those students first walk into your classroom, their mind is going to be all over the place. So a great starter for any teacher is to establish 5 minutes of silence at the beginning of class. What that 5 minutes does is it gives your students a chance to calm down and refocus their mind on what's getting ready to take place. And it gives you as a teacher an opportunity to calm down and realize that you're dealing with a different group of students. Now, you may teach 6 classes, 7 classes, or what have you. But remember, when you're working with people, people are different. Don't assume that all students are the same. They're similar, but they're not the same. Here's number 9 for you. Recognize the progress of your students and their classes often. Some people will think just because students come into your classroom that they automatically know that they're making progress. That may be true, but nothing feels better than getting validated by the teacher when a teacher says, "Great job, you're making good progress. You were here and now you were there and now you are here." You want your students to completely understand that they're making progress and that they're building on that progress. As you're building, your students are going to get stronger. They're going to appreciate more of what they're learning because they can see that they're getting better at it. They see the results. Okay. And here's number 10. Number 10 is to reflect. Effective teachers reflect every single day. And when they think about what they have done, they focus in on how to improve. So they have what I call research and development. As a teacher, you have to use the abilities that you learned as you were getting your degrees and apply those to what you do every single day in the classroom. So research and development. Anyway, this is Coach Rahien. Until next time, Make sure that you're an effective teacher.